Hi, it's the Soul Whisperer, Amy Shaw here. I want to make a video today talking about direct experience, but specifically I'm going to talk about Kail-Ma. I've made a couple videos already talking about direct experience and I ended up not uploading them. I expect my YouTube channel is going to go through some changes in the very near future, and how that likely is going to look is a lot less material being produced by me. That's mostly just because I have a lot of irons in the fire right now, and I'm losing the desire to spend my resources on creating content specifically for YouTube. I'm moving into a phase where I'm much more interested in working one-on-one with people in mentoring them in their shamanic paths. So I'm putting more of my resources and energy into that, into developing and maintaining those relationships, which makes me a little bit less available to share myself on YouTube. But I'm always available, so if you want to get a hold of me, there's a lot of different ways, and I would love to interact with you one-on-one and explore how I might be able to assist you on your path and what you also may offer me on mine. I learn from everybody that comes into my life, and I'm honored and grateful for that. So today I want to talk about specifically Kail-Ma, and again in a context of direct learning from a direct experience. The reason direct experience came up for me is several weeks ago I did an interview for a different project. It's on a different channel with a friend of mine, Sue Collard. She's a licensed professional counselor and also a shamanic practitioner. And she and I were talking. I was sharing with her a little bit of my experience with someone who had come to me seeking help, and was asking her what she thought about it just to get a context. And she was reminding me the value of direct experience in the shamanic path. In other words, how we learn in the shamanic path is usually not based on book learning per se. It's not usually based on training per se. It's not even based in faith in the same way the religious traditions would hold faith, but it's based entirely on direct experience. And so in that way, it comes more from center and from an empowered place of being. So in the past, when I made videos talking about direct experiences, the ones I didn't upload, it was within the context of what was happening for me at that time in that aspect of my life. Today, I want to share about it in the context of my experience with Kail-Ma. And the reason this has come up is because recently I've been engaging in discussion, and somebody mentioned Kali and her role, how she works and the work that she does in our process. And it really brought up my personal direct experience with Kail-Ma, and also something that happened to me last week when I went to Circle. So let me just start by sharing. Kail-Ma, if you don't know who she is a Hindu goddess. I won't get into too many of the details of that from the Hindu aspect, because a lot of it I don't really recall actually, and I don't resonate with that. I'm not a Hindu. I haven't extensively studied Hinduism. In fact, before Kali came into my life, I really didn't even know who she was. I may have seen photos of her before, but all the Hindu gods are very similar. They have many arms, and so I couldn't have even been able to discern between, say, like Kali and Durga, or know much about their roles or how they differed or even what their names were. But when Kali first came to me, she actually came to me in a dream, and a curious thing happened, and I'm not really sure if this actually invoked her presence or if it was other factors that came into play. But we were getting ready to move into this house that we live in now, and I went and collected some moving boxes from an old neighbor who also had recently moved. And apparently their daughter, although I can't absolutely affirm this because I was not really close to them, didn't know that much about their family situation, but apparently they had a daughter that went by the name of either Kali or Kali, I'm not sure how they say it. It was K-A-L-I. And so some of the boxes that we retrieved to reuse from them had marked on the outside, Kali's room. One of those boxes, it was like a banker type box, I ended up putting all my music CDs in it, and it sat outside of my bedroom for a period of time. So every day I would walk past this box and see Kali's room written on it. And again, I did not know who Kail-Ma was, or that her name was even Kail-Ma, but I would see this name Kali. So what happened is one night I had this dream, and it was a very peculiar dream. I was standing in front of a swimming pool in a very large backyard, and it was all concreted all around it. It was a very large swimming pool. And on the other side, I was at one end of the swimming pool. On the other side of the long swimming pool, there were all these gods and goddesses sort of laid out in these peculiar, they didn't appear in the forms that you would traditionally think of them. They were not in human forms. They were just in peculiar forms, and I won't go into too much detail about that, but just leave it like that. And they were all there sort of splayed out, and they were like posing and flexing muscles and doing all these really odd, quirky things as if they were trying to get my attention. So I was quite amused by this, and I was sort of standing on the other side of the pool watching this unfold across the pool, and it was amusing to me. It was funny because they were over animated and they were funny, and it was as if they were trying to all vie for my attention and get me to pick them or choose them. And then all of a sudden, out of the crowd comes this top. It was a spinning top, like a child's top. So this is what a traditional antique child's top looks like. It's wood, it has this little handle, it spins on the little edge there. And so in the dream, the top was very similar to this. It was wooden, and it was painted, but it was spinning, as they do, very, very fast, just like this too, you know, this kind of wobbly movement. And it came up out of the crowd and around the side of the pool directly towards me. And it was very, very colorful, spinning wildly very fast. And I just remember giggling and being completely amused by this. And I knew it was a goddess, you know, the way that it was painted, and the energy, the presentation of it, I knew it was female. But I couldn't identify who it was or even what the meaning of the dream was. I just know that it was an amusing dream, and I woke myself up actually giggling. At this time in my shamanic practice, I was doing a lot of healing work, as I still do a lot of healing work, but it was a little bit different than the work that I do now. That's evolved somewhat. So I was doing healing work, it's distance work, so every single day I would walk on the treadmill for an hour. Half of that time I would spend listening to the music. The other half of the time I would spend doing the shamanic work. So going into a trance state and doing the work. So I went to the gym. This was after this dream occurred. I was doing this distance healing work. And this sort of swirling energy started showing up. It was sort of in the periphery, just this feeling of swirling, and I didn't know what it was. So I asked, you know, the spirits, what is this? What's going on? And I heard the term whirling dervish. And again, like with my dream, it made me giggle. I giggled because it was a curious term. And although it had a vague familiarity to me, I didn't know exactly what it meant. It just sounded funny to me, whirling dervish. So again, I giggled. Okay, sometimes the spirits, they do this. They play jokes on us. They like to play. You know, they have this playfulness about them. So, whirling dervish, okay, I laughed. It was funny. And I went back to the seriousness of doing my healing work. The next day, again, this swirling energy. Well, this went on for about 2 weeks, increasing in intensity, this swirling energy that would come, this swirling energy. Again, I heard the term whirling dervish. So this is the second time I've heard this term. So this time I'm like, okay, the spirits are trying to convey something to me, and I'm just not taking it seriously. So I came home from the gym having that experience, and I Googled whirling dervish, and sure enough, this is a thing. Those Sufi dancers that you see are that's what they're called, whirling dervishes. And I learned a little bit about what they are and what they do, and how that's a form of meditation for them, and how Sufism is sort of like a sect of the Islamic faith. So I thought, okay, now I have this information about whirling dervishes, and that's really cool. I mean, this really is a thing, and they really do this, and they meditate, and that's how they meditate, is by dancing in a circle over and over with their arms out, and it's really beautiful. If you're not familiar, look it up. It's really beautiful, the tradition of it and what they do. So I took this information, and I didn't really know, like, I'm not really exactly sure what to do with this. I just know that something's happening. Uninvited, something is happening, and this whirling energy, and now this connection with whirling dervishes, and what am I supposed to do with this? So the very next day, again, I go into the gym, I go into my trance state, I'm doing my distant shamanic healing work, and there, as I have the person laid out, and I'm, being led by the spirits to do this, to do that, which is peculiar enough. If you're not familiar with it, sometimes some of the things that come up are a little bit weird, but you just go with it. You go with the flow, and you learn to not question it, and you just do it. So I'm in that mode. I'm in my trance state. I'm just doing what the spirits are instructing me to do, as weird as it seems. And all of a sudden, here she comes, Kail-Ma. And she just has this presence and this energy that was incredibly intense. And first of all, she was large. She was massive, like 10 times the size of a normal human being, I would say. She was just large. I mean, she took up the whole sort of being and presence at that time in that place. And she had this giant gaping hole in her solar plexus. It was like a huge, massive hole. And out of it were 2 tornadoes that were emanating from her. In one side of the tornado, she was like sucking up all the human beings, just like sucking them up, like with the tornado energy, this swirling tornado energy that was unapologetic. It was incompassionate. It was indiscriminate. Like, she didn't care the lives that were being ripped open, the people that were being sucked up and being killed. She didn't care. There was no personalization to it, no connection to it in any sort of nurturing or mothering way. It just was what it was. And so she was sucking up just like a tornado. On the other side was the second tornado, and she was spitting out infants, like brand new human beings, brand new souls. And again, there was no nurturing connection to it, no sense of compassion about it. It was just sucking up and spitting out, sucking up and spitting out, and it was a wild, just fierce, crazy energy. And of course, immediately I was like, what is happening here? So then she pulls out her swords, and this lady is no joke. She just like completely decapitated me. She completely gutted me from, the stump of my neck all the way down to my pelvis. Ripped me open. My guts are spilling out all over the place, slippery and slimy. And she's just like dancing on them like crazy. I have the person that I am doing the healing with laid out there. She does the same, completely decapitates and is dancing all over the bloody mess of the person. And I'm just like beside myself. I'm terrified. I was very familiar with dismemberment. I had dismemberments before, but they were very like gentle and, and it's interesting because when I did this interview with Sue, she talked about that dismemberment, how it's important to let people know when they begin, to do this type of shamanic work, that dismemberment is a normal thing that happens. And she talked about her own dismemberment. She talked about it like getting eaten by a deer and then pooped out, and, and I think for a lot of people, dismemberments can be like that. And that seems really scary as it is. Some people get swallowed by a snake, or they get nibbled by an animal, or some people burn up in fire and, go up into the smoke. And there's a lot of different forms that dismemberment has taken. And I've heard a lot of different stories of dismemberment. I had had dismemberment experiences myself, but they tended to be, much more gentle and easygoing in comparison. At the time you think, what is happening to me? But in comparison to my experience with Kail-Ma, this was like terrifying. I mean, this was just, can you imagine? Like, it was extremely gory. It was extremely it was terrifying. It scared me enough that it caused me to stop in my tracks. I stopped doing any shamanic work for a solid 2 weeks because I thought, oh, am I somehow projecting this out of my shadow? Is this coming out from me? Or did I do something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? I didn't know. I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't really have an elder that I could turn to that could guide me on this. So for 2 weeks, I just sort of sat with it and processed it and had to work through some of the fear that evoked, to come back to a place of recognizing what it was that happened. And actually, I'm still processing, and that was over 2 years ago that I had that experience with Kali. I'm still processing the gifts that she came to me, and trying to understand why she chose me, why she came to me, and what that means. But having that experience, it definitely did immediately make me go to Google and start searching and trying to learn about Kail-Ma to find out as much as I could, because I knew instantly when I saw her like this in this form that it was Kali. I can't tell you how I knew that, because again, I didn't have any prior experience or any knowledge of who Kali is, or even really much about the Hindu religion. So I had to go research. I started Googling it, and then just the pieces all started fitting together. And it was then that I realized that it was her that showed up in my dream, and that that whirling energy and the whirling dervishes, I still could not tell you exactly how that was connected to Kail-Ma, the whirling dervishes, but I just know there was a connection, and it was almost like they were coming to announce her impending arrival, like they were preparing me by letting me sort of feel her energy and get comfortable with it and be amused by it, enough that she could come and not like completely shut me down, where I just stopped, dead in my tracks and never came back to my shamanic path again. So I think maybe that was part of it, but even then, as I said, I'm still learning. So the point of it is that was a direct experience of Kail-Ma. That was one of my experiences of dismemberment, and her energy is still with me very much, and I'm still learning from her. The point of it is, I did not invoke her. I did not evoke her. There was nothing that I did consciously within myself to invite her. She just showed up. And the value of direct experience, because some people could just say, well, that was just your imagination. And believe me, I thought that. That's what really caused me to step back for 2 weeks and go, okay, what's going on? Something's emanating out of me. There's some hidden work that I haven't done yet, or something I haven't cleared yet. I mean, believe me, I really did think that it was coming from me. So I had to just trust that actually this was my direct experience, and it wasn't coming from me. This is a real experience that happened in the spiritual realm. And, I know people will hear this story and they'll just think, oh, it's your imagination, you made it up, and, look how disturbed you are that you think about these things, and this is in you, and I understand that point of view. But let me just tell you, for example, how shamans learn and how important direct experience is to our path and how we learn. Last week I went to Women's Shamanic Circle, and the topic, we're starting to work with the elements. The topic was the element of air. And so as our facilitator is teaching and going down, the list, and we're learning about air and the different elements of air, some things like really start sticking out to me. Number one, the sword. The sword is part of the element of air. Number two, wind. Of course, wind is part of the element of air. It's part of the magic, the energy of working with the element of air is wind. So we talked about tornadoes, hurricane. We talked about weather shamanism. We talked about the sword being the aspect of air. And all of these things, I'm listening to all of these things. I'm taking notes in my journal. And all of a sudden, it dawns on me, the color yellow is another one. The color yellow is associated with the element of air. The color yellow is also associated with the solar plexus. And when I saw Kali, when she first appeared, she had this gaping hole in her solar plexus. And it was out of her solar plexus that the two tornadoes were emanating. So as I'm listening to the facilitator talk about air and the elements of the air and everything that's associated with it magically and all of this, I'm having more and more resonance. And you know, as I looked through the list of all the air elements, I just went, that is Kali. That's Kali. She is an air goddess. So I shared my experience of Kali, and I asked, well, is she an air goddess? Because nobody's really talking about which goddesses are associated with which elements. And the facilitator, who's been in shamanic practice for 30 plus years, she tells me, well, that hasn't typically been, she's not typically known as an air goddess. I've never heard that, and I'm not familiar with that. But based on what you're describing of your experience, then I would have to say, yes, she's an air goddess. So I came home and I Googled like goddesses for elements and tried to find as much information as I could about which goddesses are associated with which elements. And I couldn't find anything about Kail-Ma being associated with any particular element, and definitely nothing tying her to the air element. So I'm here to just tell you, based on my experience of Kail-Ma, she's a goddess of the air element. That's her domain. That's her magic. That's what she works is air magic. So this is entirely new information. It's just an example of how I didn't learn it from a book. I didn't read it on a website. Nobody else told me this in a circle or handed me this information. This information came channeled through me in my direct experience with Kail-Ma in the spiritual realm. So this is how shamanic work actually works. It's what it actually looks like. It's how we get our information and how we know. And we can share that with each other. But direct experience is a profound thing. And because that is my direct experience, as my friend Sue was alluding to in the interview that I had with her, nobody can really take that away from me. Nobody can tell me otherwise, because I know what I know. I had my experience, and it was tried and true, and it's being externally validated 2 years later even, as I go on and integrate that experience into my practice and all the amazing gifts that Kali gave me in her presence. You know, as I keep learning about that, I'm just affirmed more and more and more externally how that was a direct experience. And so the value of direct experience is very profound in shamanic work. It's important. And Sue talked about how difficult it is when you deal with people that come from religious backgrounds, say for Christianity, for instance. You know, they go to church and they're very boxed in to a very narrow view and a particular lens with which they're told to look at the world. And they're very unwilling to look at the world through any other lens other than that lens, because they're sort of prodded in by fear. Put on a different lens and look at something in a different way than the one that they've been trained to. They're told that, oh, that's demonic, or that's the devil, or that potentially can lead you astray. And so they're very in fear. They stay within a very narrow path, and they'll even pride themselves on that, right? The narrow is the way that leads to heaven, and wide is the way that leads to hell, basically. They pride themselves on essentially their narrowness, their narrow-mindedness. But the fundamental problem with this is that they can have direct experience that actually contradicts their religious belief or their religious system. But because they're so ingrained in looking at everything through that lens, that they don't even know how to experience or process direct experience. And that's most especially true if it contradicts their religious belief or their faith. So in a lot of ways, they allow faith, or this unseen sort of non-experience, to dictate the realities of their direct experience. So this, I feel, fundamentally is how the shamanic path is very, very different than a religious path or a path of faith. It's very different than the faith traditions. And it's very much about personal empowerment and championing that direct experience and allowing that to become the knowledge base and to create the sense of reality for the individual person that's on the shamanic path. So anyway, I wanted to encourage you in that, and I hope that my story of Kail-Ma and how she came to me wasn't too terrifying for you. She does still show up occasionally when I'm doing shamanic work, and she really likes to sever heads, so she does a lot of beheading, a lot of dismemberment. Not only continues to do it to me, but also when I am working with people in distance, she'll come and offer her presence. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I don't see it fundamentally as something that I am doing wrong. I'm actually grateful. I sort of just observe when her energy comes in. It's very strong. It overpowers mine. And I step back and I just allow her to do the work, and I sort of observe. And it's interesting. The moments that she chooses to come in and who she chooses to work with and how she chooses to work with them is interesting. I learn from it. I just observe and I learn, and I allow her to teach me. I'm grateful for the various gifts that she's given me. But she's, yes, very formidable. So, I hope that my sharing about her hasn't been too scary or too disturbing. If you have any questions, if you have comments, maybe you've experienced Kail-Ma, I would love to hear what your experience of her has been. I just want to encourage you, leaning in with a little bit of elder wisdom that I can offer you is that I'm, making this video, I'm offering it in a context of direct experience, but in no way would I ever encourage you to invoke Kail-Ma into your life. I think that at the time that she came, for whatever reason, I was ready for it. And as I said, she came in slowly over time, first appearing in a dream, and then through these whirling dervishes that were sort of announcing her energy. It was all in preparation for her real, fully embodied presence. And so I would never encourage anybody to ever invoke any deity or entity, really, to just allow these things to come naturally and organically as they will. And that's mostly because if you're not ready for it, it can be very traumatic, and you can actually cause yourself a lot of trauma. You can damage your astral body, and it can take a long time to actually heal from that. So it's just not a wise thing to invoke spirits or entities or deities or goddesses or any of that, angels even, unless you really have worked with that before and it came to you organically when you were ready. So I just want to give that little disclaimer. And again, as always, I appreciate you guys watching my videos. If you can give me a thumbs up or share it, I would really appreciate it. If you want to get a hold of me, there's a lot of different ways that you'll find on my YouTube channel to be able to do that. Or you can leave a question or comment down below. I love interacting with you guys, and I appreciate and am so honored by you being a part of my YouTube project. So have a great day, and I love you guys so much.